Dear representatives, colleagues, when setting up this budget, I had to think back to the 1990s, when I was still young. And then this country suffered from dark red budget figures. The accounts had to be in order to be able to access the Eurozone. I dare to say that we are facing an even bigger challenge today. The Nestor of my government, who has been participating in Belgian top politics since the 1980s, spoke about the most difficult budget exercise he has ever seen. And who am I to contradict the indispensable Frank van den Broeken? Not for nothing am I only here a month and a half after the official opening of the political year. Too late, so. You already noticed that. The fact is, however, that the context today is even more difficult than it was in the 1990s. Our economic growth was still of the kind that budgets could be filled on their own again. Today, that is just the other way around. If we do nothing, the potholes only get deeper. In addition, we now have far fewer hands available to pull us out of the pothole than we did then. For example, we no longer have our own currency. We can still count on a peace dividend. On the contrary, we have to force ourselves to make a lot of costs to help ensure peace on this continent. And the demographic reality also works against us. In the 1990s, there were still 4 people of working age for every 65 plus. Today, there are 3, and in a few decades, there may only be 2. The population pyramid of Wever is coming to a head. Fewer and fewer workers are in for the pensions of more and more elderly people. That makes the challenge we are now facing unseen in our recent history. Without a thorough and consistent answer, we are for the first time since the Industrial Revolution have to contribute to structural prosperity and therefore also to well-being. The tide must be turned. In essence, we can do this in 2 ways. First, by working with more people and working together longer. As a country, we are insufficient in this. Our level of employment is still below the European average, just like the length of our runways. Second, by creating more prosperity with the same effort. In other words, by increasing our productivity. But unfortunately, we are also less and less successful in the past decades. We are no longer achieving the productivity growth of the 1980s and 1990s. Our economy is stagnating, making it increasingly difficult for us to finance government spending. Low productivity growth and insufficient employment in combination with increasing social costs. It is a recipe for disaster. We already saw that in the budget inherited by this government. In February, in my statement, the Monitoring Committee indicated that the federal deficit in indirect policy would explode to 6% of GDP in 2029, or up to 43 billion euros. You actually have to add the inevitable 4 billion extra for defense. Almost half of that amount consists of interest costs. And this is the price we pay for irresponsible spending behavior from the past. That is why we have now immediately set up a budget until and with 2029. No more spending. Because, dear colleagues, difficult times require determination and strength of action. In neighboring countries, we see that the specter of impasse and political blockade is never far. With all the harmful consequences that this implies, this country cannot afford it. That is why, since the first day, this government has been trying to implement essential reforms at an unprecedented pace. We are aware that these reforms may raise questions and concerns among the population, but these reforms are absolutely necessary. In their implementation, the government will therefore remain at the service of social consultation. It is in this spirit that adaptations have already been made, especially in the framework of the pension reform. The goal is to put this country on the path of a budgetary purge and to consolidate its resilience in the face of geopolitical turbulence. In response to the aging population, we have implemented a major reform in order to continue to be able to finance our pensions. We have put an end to the excess of the system, in particular with an effort for the highest pensions. We have aligned the regime of civil servants with that of employees and independents. And we have strengthened the link between the number of years of actual work and the amount of pension, while ensuring the necessary protection for people affected by illness or misfortune. These reforms are not pleasant. I am well aware of this, but they serve the general interest. They allow for a more equitable, more reasonable, and better financed pension model. This will also bear fruit in the long term. This reform will allow to divide costs linked to aging by 2 over a period of 40 years. The horizon of this government therefore goes beyond a single legislature. We are doing what is right for our children and grandchildren, and we will be grateful to be able to reap the fruits of the measures that the government has dared to take. We have also implemented reforms in other areas of social security, reforms that should have been implemented several decades ago. In recent months, many stories have been relayed about people who are able to work, but who have remained at home for more than 20 years, while receiving unemployment benefits. Poignant testimonies. Poignant testimonies. Often, these people have been forgotten by a system that has kept them dependent on the state, and that has not taken enough to activate them. We have chosen not to leave these people to their own fate. We are going to get them out of their isolation and help them get back on their feet. This is why we have limited unemployment benefits to a maximum duration of 2 years. The unemployment system must be full. It can never be a hammock for life. Dear colleagues, in order for as many people as possible to be at work, we are also reducing the barriers to access to our job market. In particular, we will reduce taxation on additional voluntary hours, remove absurd rules concerning the minimum working hours, offer students the opportunity to earn more, and raise the ceiling for flexi jobs from 12,000 to 18,000 euros, an amount that will now be indexed. We are also reducing the burden on pensioners who still want to remain active. They will be able to continue working from 2027, with the exception of pension, on a liberating 30% tax. Note that this does not apply to ministerial wages that cannot be accumulated with a pension. Excuse Frank and John. With these measures, we want to give the oxygen necessary to our labor market in times of poverty. We want everyone who wants to work, in whatever form, to be encouraged. Encouraging labor is one of the credos of this government. We do this not only through reforms in the labor market, but also through fiscal reforms. By 2030, those who work will be able to count on an average of around 1,000 additional euros a year. Our state of providence rests on the shoulders of the middle class. It deserves all our recognition. In addition to our prosperity, this government is also concerned about our security, the essential mission of the state. The security departments do not suffer any economy. On the contrary, additional investments are planned. This is worth as much for internal justice and security as it is for defense. We will also better coordinate these areas. These investments do not go unnoticed. They are accompanied by necessary reforms. Thus, the Brussels police zones will finally be fused. We are implementing a global and firm policy to break the economic model of organized crime, which is mainly experienced in our big cities. Together with our European partners, we are also doing our part to defend our continent. Our break from history is over. From this year on, we will finally comply with the NATO norm, which this country promised to its allies 11 years ago. We have strategic mistakes from the past, mistakes that made us dependent on regimes that are taking us under fire today. That is why we are approaching the energy issue with an open mind, full of dogma and with an eye on stable supply and affordable prices for families and entrepreneurs. We therefore finally abolished the law on the nuclear power plant. The government is also focusing on a strict but humane migration policy. The system of family reunification is being stricter, and the price of our nationality reflects the value of our citizenship. For this government, this citizenship is not equal to an access ticket to Social Security, but to an engagement for our society. No civil rights without civil obligations. In short, we are reforming our social and economic system and making our society resilient at the same time. All these measures are already being implemented within the government in the so-called Eastern and Summer Agreements. The Monetary Committee has already shown the effects of all these reforms in September. Namely, a reduction in debt by 15 billion euros in this legislative period, and in the long term, they will even improve the budget by 12 billion euros per year. Billions that we do not spend on our children and grandchildren. So this government is doing what should have happened 20 years ago. But our housing problem is so big that these reforms alone are not enough. Dear colleagues, it was... Thank you very much, Mr. Frank. This is gladly done. Dear colleagues, it made the government a choice. Or just set up the budget of 2026 and kick the ball for us again. Or immediately deliver a robust billion-dollar budget for the entire legislature. It reminds me of the crossroads of Heracles. The Greek hero had to choose between two different paths, each represented by a goddess, one by the sinful Kakia, the other by the virtuous Arethea. The false Kakia apparently chose an easy path that would lead to a lazy life. The Arethea, on the other hand, chose a steep, narrow, and difficult path. They thus depicted the eternal truth that true happiness is only achieved through hard work and perseverance. Labor et constantia. Heracles chose Arethea, the difficult path, and in the end, he would reach the Olympics and join the gods. We are not yet determined on the Olympics with this country, and I am not here with a divine feeling. Let that be very clear. But the government already has the courage to climb the path of Arethea. We did not choose for convenience, but for the Herculean task of a billion-dollar budget. The exercise was not obvious because the low-hanging fruit has long been plucked. The price of looking away for too long is that no more painless budget can be made, and that makes us, as policymakers, very vulnerable. But there is no other choice. What we do not save today, we have to pay back tomorrow, double and triple, in interest on growing debts. So whoever is conscientious has only one choice. Now act. And we are going to do that. In the first place, we look at savings. With a broad package of measures, we save more than 2.7 billion. This includes, for example, efficiency gains in healthcare and the reduction of the number of civil servants. In 2026 and 2028, we will also pass a cent index on wages and expenses above average. In addition to the budget, this measure also improves our competitiveness. Oxygen that our companies can use very well. And politics also saves on itself. We set a good example and we go further than other professional groups. The wages of politicians will not be indexed in the coming legislature, just like that was already the case for party donations. The government will do that for itself and asks the House of Representatives to follow suit. This comes on top of the previously decided savings on the ministers, the cabinets, and the parliamentary statute. The second important pillar is the approach of the increasing number of long-term patients. It concerns more than 500,000 people in this country who are of working age. Per capita, this is a multiplication of the numbers in neighboring countries such as Germany and the Netherlands. A recent survey of the RICIV shows that many people are definitely too fast and end up in the forget-me-nots. That is not in the interest of our society. Even less in the interest of those people themselves. That is why this government will take measures to refer all actors to their duties, both employees, doctors, medical funds, and employers. These measures are good for a savings of 2 billion euros by 2029. For all clarity, those who actually fall ill will be able to continue to count on solidarity. But there will be stricter and more control over possible abuse of that solidarity. In addition, we will focus more on what people can still do, and how they can still do it can take a meaningful place in our society. A third package of measures concerns a tax shift within the tax on consumption, which generates 1.3 billion. We are not increasing the rates of VAT, but we are making a series of shifts within the existing rates. Some adaptations also intervene in the policy of taxes. For example, the use of natural gas becomes slightly more expensive, which meets a European obligation. Electricity taxes decrease for their part. In accordance with the balance agreed in the government agreement, we also ask for a fair contribution to the largest taxes. The main measure is an increase in the tax to 0.3% on the accounts of more than 1 million euros. We are also planning other various measures, such as the tax on parcels from non-European countries, to protect our local trade. In all, these measures represent a little over 2 billion euros. But the recipes and the economies on their own will obviously not suffer. This government is aware that economic growth and the sanitization of public finances are linked. We must first bake the cake before we can share it. And these are not just words. Each additional percentage of economic growth improves our budgetary balance of 4 billion euros. This is why this government is taking new measures that stimulate entrepreneurship, which constitutes the engine of our prosperity. The government will therefore implement a detailed PME plan and reduce costs in various sectors. Our industry can also count on us. In addition to a stable energy supply, we aim to reduce their costs through an energy standard. In addition, a part of the budgetary balance will be devoted to the fight against overpopulation in our prisons. Dear colleagues, with this budget exercise, we are once again taking important steps in the sanitation of the budget. In total, it comes down to an extra, the structural savings of more than 9 billion euros against 2029. Throughout the entire legislature, this exercise reduces the debt buildup again with 17 billion euros extra. Together with the 15 billion we have already done, it comes down to a decline of 32 billion euros. We are thus avoiding the European Penal Bank and send a powerful signal to the international markets. Dear colleagues, with the reforms and sanitations that this government is implementing, the right path has been taken. But the journey is still difficult and long. This is not the end. It is not even the beginning of the end, but it is perhaps the end of the beginning. In difficult times, there are hands on the wheel and a race is being chosen. And I realize very well that we are not yet at our destination. The wheel will have to be held firmly in our hands to keep and tighten the race that has been chosen. There is no reason for a euphoria, there is only a reason to work hard. Today the work, only tomorrow the fruit. To be able to continue this work with this government, I ask the confidence of the Parliament. To be able to continue this work with this government, I ask the confidence of the Parliament. To continue this work with this government, I ask the Parliament for its trust. Thank you.